Amen. All right. Let's go over the syllabus just quickly. Not much to go over. It's self-explanatory. Has some the schedule laid out here. We'll try to stick to that as much as we can. The main thing I want to go over is we're not going to have any exams. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover some of the questions. You're going to have questions at the end of these chapters we're going to go over. And we'll answer those questions together. But I want you to answer them. I think it'll be good for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to, you're going to see in there under number 4 of the course schedule A, we're going to fill out the map on page 36. Okay, I think it'll be good for us. It'll give us an idea of what these landmarks are. And when we're talking about things in class, moving forward, when you're in class, you're talking about these things, it'll give you a better idea having taken this class. You have on there in B, right underneath that, under homework, we may or may not do that. If I can get a pretty good map of that to give you to go home and where you can do the land allotments, I think that's a good idea to have a good idea of how the land allotments were when they went into Canaan. To be able to know that Dan was here, Manasseh was here, you know, the half tribes and different things of that. I think that's a good idea to know that. Is your soul going to be contingent upon knowing that? Well, of course not. But it's a good idea to know the history of some of these things. And it helps a lot. So that's what we're going to do. And that's how we're going to grade this class, because I think that's probably, to me, it's going to be the fairest way to do it. And I'm going to ask you, those who are taking this for credit, if you did the questions, then you'll just tell me, I did the questions. Okay? And that's how we're going to go about it. And we'll talk about the questions in class. And we'll ask them. And you can just go ahead and fill those bad boys in while we're doing it. And if you have any questions, you just ask. And we'll talk about it. Now, I didn't get to really go through my PowerPoint like I wanted to. I was out of town. I appreciate Brother Ron filling in for me. I had a couple different emergencies going on at the same time, that's why we call it life, right? If it was easy, we'd call it something else. And so I appreciate your patience with me, but I am thankful to be back with you. So let's talk a little bit about geography. Ron talked to you about what geography means the last time. The writing of the history of the earth, the layout of the earth. And that's what we're going to talk about, particularly about the Bible lands. And we see here a picture of the Bible lands. Now, the most important part of the Bible lands that we're going to be interested in, for the most part, is this green section right here. And I know the last time y'all talked about this, it's known as the Fertile Crescent because of the way it's shaped and because it is such a fertile area. And it's called that because of all the water. You have these primarily two great rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. We'll talk a little more about them later on. But when we talk about the Bible lands, we talk about two different names a lot of the time. We talk about the land of what? Canaan, right? When the children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness, right around in here, they were headed up to the land of Canaan. Now, the land of Canaan and Palestine are actually two different places. The land of Canaan is within Palestine. When we think of the land of Canaan is about from right here down to about right here, from here over to here. And so if we want to look at what your book says in chapter 3, if you want to turn over to chapter 3, we're going to skip chapter 2. The Bible land bounded on the east by the Jordan River, and on the west by the Mediterranean Sea was Canaan. The Lebanon mountains formed the northern boundary of Canaan, and the desert bordered it by the south. Now, if you look on page 16 of your map, of your book, and that's page 17, chapter 3. And if you're looking at page 16, this is a pretty good map. I wish it was color. But if you look at the northern part, you see Mount Hermon there? And if you look to the left of Mount Hermon, you see this river called Leonites. That's probably not the best pronunciation of that. There's another name for that. Orontes. I think Ron may have talked a little bit about that last time. Orontes. That was actually the northern border of Canaan. Okay? So if you see that river there, and you go over to the Jordan River, and you go straight down, that is going to be south of the Dead Sea into the desert. That's going to be the land of Canaan. So it's going to be, it's going to be this area right in here. That's the promised land. That's the land that flowed with milk and honey. And if you look at it on the map, that's right in that Fertile Crescent. You could grow all kinds of good stuff in there. Okay? Now, the name Palestine here, as you look in your book, why would they call it Palestine? Well, it came from this name, or this phrase, Philistine land, because the Philistines used to live there. They used to inhabit that. Now, when the children of Israel, God's people, went in and they were told to kick out all of these people, and they began to defeat these different tribes of people, they did a pretty good job, but they didn't get the job completely done. And one of those folks that they did not completely kick out was a tribe or a group of folks called the Philistines. And they were continually a thorn in the side of Israel. And when we get over to the book of Judges, and we see that one of the judges' name was Samson. And Samson was from an area right around in here. And we'll see a map here in a minute that'll show that. But it was right close to the border of where the Philistines were. Well, of course that's where Samson was from, because God raised him up to throw off the yoke of bondage of the Philistines, so he had to be close to there. And that was a real problem, okay? Now, as we look at the area of the whole of the land, now we're looking at Palestine, and we're looking at these areas that eventually became the whole of the land. Now, that changed over time, okay? And again, we're going to see right here, this is the area where Samson was from. We're going to see different areas where the judges were from. The blue areas, you can't see it really well from here, but the blue areas were the major prophets, and the red dots are where the judges were from. So, anyway, we see the different, we're going to notice the different bodies of water. We're going to notice the different mountain ranges. We're going to talk about the different rivers. There's a river, Egypt, that comes along the border of Israel, up close by the Mediterranean Sea. And the book is certain to point out here that we're not talking about the Nile River. The Nile River is down there around Egypt. And but what we do know is Palestine is about a fourth the size of Pennsylvania, 1,200 square miles. Now, or 12,000 square miles. But when Solomon became king, he expanded the borders of Palestine, Israel. And he expanded those borders to about 60,000 square miles. So under the rule of Solomon, peace grew. There weren't these great wars. God blessed him. And do you remember why God blessed him so greatly? Pardon me? Because of David. And when God appeared to Solomon, he asked him, what would you like me to give you? And Solomon said, give me understanding. I want to be able to lead these people. You remember how he described himself? He said, I don't know how to come in and to go out. My grandmother used to say that, said that individual, he doesn't even know how to come in out of the rain. Have you heard that? She might have been talking about me sometimes. But that's kind of how Solomon described himself, because he was a young man. He knew the great burden that was about to be upon him. And he wanted God to bless him with great understanding. And that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about wisdom. And we're studying Proverbs last night. And of course, Solomon wrote a great number of Proverbs. And so, along with that great blessing of wisdom, because he didn't ask for longevity, because he didn't ask for great wealth, he didn't ask for peace and or the lives of his enemies, God said, I'm going to give you those things as well. And so they had this great period of peace that they'd never known before. So the whole time that Solomon was king, he wasn't a man of war like his father David was a man of war. But Solomon reigned, and his borders were expanded. So we see here that Palestine, here is another view of Palestine, and we see the Great Sea here, often called that, the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea. We see the Jordan River. The Jordan River, this is called the Sea of Galilee. We're going to notice the Sea of Galilee is called by 3 other names over the period of time. We're going to want to know what those names are. Lake Hula, that's what it is. Now, what we want to know as well is this lake here is no longer in existence. They drained that thing. In modern times, they drained it, because what we learned to find out, that's a very shallow lake. This is a swampy area all the way around this. And what happens when you have a swampy area and it gets hot? What does that tend to draw? Disease, mosquitoes, that causes a problem, right? So that's no longer around anymore. They filled that in. And so, but we have the Sea of Galilee, and from here all the way down to this body of water, which we know, of course, is the Dead Sea. Does anyone know how many miles that is? That's about 120 miles. Now, the Jordan River is so crooked and wavy that water doesn't flow 120 miles. It flows more like 200 miles because the river is so crooked. So the water moves from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea about 200 miles. That's pretty interesting. So you have an additional 80 miles. The drop in sea level, about every mile, drops 22 feet. So by the time you get from here to here, it's a drastic drop in level of height. And we're going to notice I have a good diagram for us to understand. So when you're going from Jerusalem down to Jericho, from here, now you notice that Jericho is north of Jerusalem, right? Right here's Jericho, north of Jerusalem. But what do they always say when you go to Jericho? You go down. You go down from Jerusalem. And Ron was pointing out in his class that skeptics always say, well, there you go. Those writers of the Bible can't even tell north from south. Because when you go down, what direction are you going? You're going south, aren't you? Well, we're going to notice in a few moments here when we get over to the slide why they would say you're going down. Elevation makes a big difference. Elevation makes a huge difference. Now, the topography of the Bible lands is just magnificent. Right here is a little town called Joppa. What do we remember about Joppa? What sticks out in our minds about the city of Joppa? Peter was there. Who did he meet in Joppa? Do you remember? There was a lady there. She had two names that she went by. Dorcas and Tabitha. Now, also Peter was there on another occasion. He was staying with a man who was a tanner. Simon the tanner, and there was a message came to him sent by someone by the name of, do you recall? Cornelius. Said, come to me. If you'll come up here, I'll listen to you preach the gospel. And of course, he was the first Gentile to have the gospel preached to him, and he obeyed that gospel. So this is Joppa, is right here. Now, the city of Joppa separates two plains. From here all the way up to this little knob right here. Now, this little knob right here has a mountain on it. That's called Mount Carmel. Okay? We'll get to that in just a second. So all up and down through here is a little plain called the Plain of Sharon. Okay? Now, that's a coastal plain. Obviously, you get toward the coast. Normally, it flattens out a little bit. Okay? From here, the city of Joppa, all the way down through here, you have another coast. Now, who was it lived down in here that caused the Israelites all kinds of problems? The Philistines. So this is called the Plain of Philistia. Okay? Now, the Plain of Philistia is separated from an area back here, which is the central hill area, because you're getting over here around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is again known for having some mountainous areas, right? Because if you're going up to Jerusalem, that's what someone would say, right? I'm going to go up to Jerusalem. Even if you're in Jericho, which is north of Jerusalem. So this place in between here, you have the coastal plains, and then you have this place here called the Shephelah, okay? And then behind the Shephelah, you have this little hill area, the central mountain range, okay? That's what this place is called right here. So we're going to see that the topography of the Bible lands is just amazing. It's very different, okay? It changes from north to south and from east to west. Let's see here what I want to look at next. Physical features. I want to get over to okay. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. Let's go back to here. This little knob right here. We were talking about Mount Carmel. What do we remember about Mount Carmel? The prophets of Baal. That's where Elijah had his, during the Old Testament, that's where he had his competition with the prophets of Baal. King Ahab, Jezebel, we remember that happening. That's over in, what was that, 1 Kings chapter 18, I believe it was. And there was this big problem in chapter 17 and 18. Elijah stood up there and he issued the challenge. He said, how long are you all going to wishy-wash back and forth? You need to decide who the real God is. If it's the God of heaven, let's follow him. If it's these prophets of Baal, let's follow them. Now, how many prophets were there, by the way? 250 prophets of Baal, 200 prophets of the grove. So there's about 450 prophets, I believe, that he was fighting against. And so it went on and went on. And so they came up with a little competition up there on Mount Carmel. Now, Mount Carmel, let's see here. Check our book. May have gone a little too far. Mount Carmel rises 500 feet as it goes out into the Mediterranean. It's 1,700 feet at its peak. So it's about 1,700 feet tall. And so they're up on that mountain, and they get this little competition going, and they build these altars. And we know the story. The prophets of Baal pray all day long up into midday, and they screaming and hollering, begin to cut themselves, and Elijah mocks them, and they're not hearing anything, right? And then, of course, Elijah puts his sacrifice on the altar. He pours water on it, and that's after he had dug a trench around it, and it filled up the trench with water. And not only did fire come down from heaven and consume the altar, or the sacrifice, it consumed the altar and licked up the water and the dust. And so they proved who the true God was. And so this is happening in this area. And, you know, all of us, if we open up the back of our Bibles, we have some pretty good maps in there, and we see all of this happening. And so right across from where Jesus is doing a lot of his work, Capernaum, Galilee, Nazareth, is where the great prophet Elijah did some of his good work, right? It's happening right there together. It's amazing where this stuff is happening. Now, in the modern world, we turn on the news, we hear about the Golan Heights, don't we? We hear about some things happening over in the Middle East right now. These places are still in existence where this happened. So we can fit together biblical history, and we can overlap a modern map, and we can see these exact same places that's happening today. Mount Hermon right here. What do we know about Mount Hermon? Well, Mount Hermon is about 9,200 feet tall. It has snow on the caps of the mountain year round. Okay? Now, I did a paper one time when I was in school on Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, now we don't know for a fact, but Mount Hermon is very likely where Jesus was when he was transfigured. There's a very good case to be made that this is the place where Jesus was transfigured. Okay? Does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. But it's very interesting if that is the place. Very close to where he did a lot of his work. And so it's an amazing place. It plays a great history in the place of the Bible lands. Now, let's kind of talk for just a moment about what we call this area. We're calling it the Bible lands. This is a modern day look at it. What do most people call that place over there? I'm using the name of the Bible lands. What do they call it? The Holy Lands? You hear that a lot, the Holy Lands? That was an apt description back when God's presence was there, wasn't it? When he was in the temple, when he was in the tabernacle, when Solomon, when David, even before Christ came, and even during the early part of Christ's ministry, that would have been an apt description of the area of the Holy Lands because of God's presence. I don't know that we call it that now, do we? Because it's just another place in the world. It's the Bible lands, and so that's what we're calling. But this is a modern day map of it. We see Israel down here, modern day Israel. We see the Mediterranean Sea. Here's Beirut, Lebanon. This is, I think that's the one. There's Mount Carmel. Yep. This is this would be the northern boundary of Canaan right here. going all the way over and down. So you can see quite a difference in what modern day the Middle East is and what it was back when God handed it over to them and told them to fight and go in and take it. Yes? No. I mean, there were people in different areas, uh, but that's the place that God chose to send His people. Because remember, you got Egypt down here. Okay, you got a great nation of Egypt. Let me back up. Let me see if I can get a better map. Uh, by the way, I talked about the river of Egypt. Here's the river of Egypt right here, coming up to and goes down this way. Let me see if I can find. That's the name of it today. It's no longer the river of Egypt. It's called the Wadi El Arish, coming down this way. Let me see. Let me see if I can find a map here in the book. You can turn to a page. But to answer your question, turn to page 32 in your book. It's not a great map, but we can see a little more of it. In page 32, you see Egypt over to the left, okay? You see the Mediterranean Sea up north. You see the river of Egypt shooting down into it, and over to the right, you see Israel, and over into the further east, you see Edom, Midian down, and so what you have is throughout the world, you have different nations and different peoples who have developed over the years. Okay, and they all came from Adam and Eve. Okay, and when Abraham was given the land promise, he was told by God that he directly would not inherit this land, that his heritage would inherit the land, his offspring would inherit the land, and they would go into a foreign nation, and they would be there for an extended period of time. And we come to find out, we learn that it would be in excess of 400 years. And we know that because the Ammonites, their iniquity had not become full yet. Because if we look back at history, when the Israelites had left Egypt, okay, Moses was leading them out of Egypt, and they were going through the wilderness, they had an opportunity to cross the land owned by the Ammonites, their brethren. Okay, they were related. What did the Ammonites tell them they could not do? You are not going to come through my land. Well, that offended God. And because of that, God said, you're going to be punished for mistreating your brethren. Okay? And so God gave them 400 years to repent, to turn around. So what you see is, and I bring that point up because just to make the point that throughout the world, throughout different places in the world, you have groups of people that have formed and that are growing, cultures producing, other than just right here. You have Egypt. You have the Chaldeans over here. You have okay, of the Chaldees over here in this Fertile Crescent area. Okay, that's where Abraham came from. That would turn into Babylon. Okay, the Chaldeans, that's Babylon. That's Iraq today, and the Persian area over in there. So you have all these different people that are developing and turning into different people. And that's why when the Israelites came in and they were on this side of the Jordan River, and they were going to cross over and take Jericho, they were told, go in here and whip these people out of here and take this land, because you have all of these heathen nations surrounding you and you do not want to be influenced by them. Well, they did a pretty good job of whipping them out, except they didn't do a complete job of whipping them out of there. And so you had the Philistines down here, right here they are, this whole area, causing problems from then on out. Okay, they never did get rid of them. And, so that was just a problem. And so it wasn't just this area that had people. It was people all over. And we can even go back to Genesis chapter 11. The Tower of Babel. They would not spread out. God wanted the people to spread out and inhabit the world. They wouldn't do it because of the very reason they knew that if they stuck together and they had this one language, man, we can accomplish some stuff. We can get it done. And God said, okay, you don't want to do it the easy way. You'll do it the way I choose for you to do it. So he confounded their languages. And then the people that had the same languages, they went out. And so from that point, they have spread out and they've gone wherever. And they group together according to their language. And that's moving forward. And then we run into Abraham in chapter 12. Okay. So you got a whole lot of folks moving ahead. How many? I don't know. A bunch. Okay, now, let's look at this. Go ahead and look at some of these other places as well. We talked about the plain of Sharon. We talked about the plain of Philistia. Well, behind the plain of, go ahead and turn to page 17. Back to the front of chapter 3. And if you look at that map on page 16, and you see Mount Carmel there, if you'll take your finger and you'll kind of follow that river from Mount Carmel all the way over to there's a river that runs from west to east there, or east to west, wherever it runs, at an angle all the way over to the Jordan River. Okay, there is a plain there that's called the plain of Esdraelon, or the valley of Jezreel. Okay, that is a super fertile plain. Okay, super fertile plain. Now, what that does, that links the coastal plain with the Jordan River Valley. The Jordan River Valley, let me see if I can find, that's not a real, well, we see the plain of Sharon there. We see the plain of Philistia. That's a little better view. What I got here? Okay, look here. Maybe we can see it here. This is the Jordan River. That's not a real good. But anyway, the valley, the Jordan River Valley is right here. And that's exactly what it is. It's just a valley that kind of pushes everything south. Okay? Jezreel, right here it is. Here's a better view. I forgot about this bit on here. So we see it kind of follows that area. And here's this Jordan River, and this is the Jordan River Valley right here. This is a really good shot right here. Have you heard of this name right here? Megiddo. That's a big name, right? You add a couple words, a couple letters in front of that, and then you get Armageddon, and that turns into Armageddon all of a sudden, right? Well, this is in a plain, okay? A plain a level area where you can do a lot of fighting, and it's easy to fight there because you have this valley of Jezreel. You have the coastal plains over here. Well, this isn't that big of an area right here. Megiddo is a small area. Okay, if you're looking in the geography of this area, it's not a huge place, but it is a pretty good place if you want to go have a battle. But you're not going to get millions and millions of soldiers in there. You're not going to be able to drive a tank battalion in there. You're not going to be able to set off your nuclear weapons in there. You're not going to be able to fight the Chinese and the Iraqis and the Russians and all the, get your Apache helicopters over there and everything else that they're saying is going to happen because Armageddon's coming. That is not what that's about, okay? This is just a spot where they would come and fight. And when we read about the Battle of Armageddon in the Revelation, it takes you longer to read about it than what it actually happens, because the news flash is there is no battle in heaven. It's not going to happen. It never did happen. It will never happen. Okay? No one can go up against God. He is not going to allow a battle to break out in heaven. And when he found out that someone sinned in heaven, he booted them out, and that was the end of the story. And so it takes a lot of thinking. It takes some pretty smart people to put together something like that, to grab millions of people and cause them to follow after such ridiculousness. So you got to give them that, I guess. But Satan's a smart individual, and so he has created that. But this is a beautiful valley right here, and it connects this valley with this plain. The plain of, what I call that, Esdraelon. And so, but that's the valley of Jezreel. And now remember, you have the coastal plains, you have that little area close around Judea, the mountainous area, and in between that you have the low hills called the Shephelah. Okay, now that was a natural border between the Philistines and Jerusalem. Okay, that kind of helped keep the people separated, and that's what this place right here is. Okay, that kept these people away from Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all this area right here. This was a natural border, and they needed that. Now Beersheba, that name sticks out in their mind, doesn't it? This is the southernmost city in Canaan, in Palestine, right? When we talk about traveling from north to south, what two cities comes to mind? They say we're going to go from this place to this place. From Dan to Beersheba. When Jeroboam set up calves, where'd he put them? Put them in Dan and Beersheba. When he didn't want the people to go back to worship properly, he put one on Dan, and because he said, "Hey, if they go to Jerusalem, I'm going to lose what God gave me." Well, how much sense does that make? That doesn't make much sense, does it? And so, but this is the Negev desert. This area right here. Negev desert. Remember, that is the southern border of Canaan. Negev desert. The desert south of the river. Yeah, Negev, yeah. All right, the term Shephelah means the lowland, and it appears in the Hebrew Bible 20 times. A long rectangular area of soft limestone stretching from Gezer in the north to just north of Beersheba in the south. It is about 27 miles long and 10 miles wide. In a sense, it is the area of foothills that separate the Philistine plain to the west from the hill country of Judah to the east, and it is a buffer zone. Now, by the way, Dan is way up in the north, but what was the original land grant that Dan had? Do you recall? Well, it was down here till the Philistines took it away from them. Yeah, it was down here. Yeah, it was down south. That's where Dan was. And then they got run out. And so that's how they ended up north. So we talked about the Central Range, the Negev, the desert country, southernmost city of Palestine, the Jordan River Valley. There we have the Central Mountain Range, is what we'll talk about right there. The Shephelah, the coastal plain, the Transjordan Plateau, which is the eastern part of Palestine. Now, something that I didn't mention is when we look at the area, the mountain. I might have a place. Might have a place to mention it here in a minute. There's the Negev. And I was telling you about the swamps. Very swampy. Lake Hula does not exist today. They have, there it is. They have gotten rid of it. It was a health hazard. Here it tells us a little bit about it. 12 miles from the city of Dan and 40 miles east of the Mediterranean Sea, Lake Hula was about 11 feet deep. It and the swampland around it have been drained in recent years. Now, of course, right around the Sea of Galilee area is one of the areas where Jesus had a part of his ministry. Capernaum was kind of his head of operations. We have Cana. What do we remember about Cana? The wedding feast. That's where he performed his first miracle. Nazareth. What about Nazareth? Where he grew up, wasn't it? Nain. What happened there? Or what do we remember about there? There was the widow of Nain, right? And then we have Decapolis, Samaria. Samaria was, what was the issue with Samaria? Why were the Jews at odds with Samaria? If a Jew was coming from Jerusalem and they wanted to go to Galilee, what was their route they would take? They would come up here, they would cross the river, go up into here, cross it again, and then go to Galilee. Well, now why in the world? That seems like that's out of the way a little bit, isn't it? Well, it is out of the way. Because they despise. Now, when we look at a map and we understand how instead of just going straight up through here, and they're going to cross over the Jordan River, which might be a task depending on what time of year you're going, and then cross it again. Well, that's a hatred for those people, isn't it? They viewed them as lower than slaves, worse than dogs. Because they were just a mixture of everybody, weren't they? And that was what would happen when the Babylonians would come in, when the Assyrians would come in. The practice would be to carry off the royalty. That's what happened to Daniel, wasn't it? Daniel got picked up and carried off. And then they would leave the poorer people. So I'm living in Jerusalem, or I'm living in Joppa, or I'm living somewhere, and they're not going to carry me off. Okay, they're going to leave all the poor folks, and then they're going to drag in a bunch of other people. from wherever, from down in Egypt or from over in, you name it. And then these people start intermarrying with each other, and they produce this just all mixed up race of people. And they call them the Samaritans because now they're part of Samaria. In Samaria, they practice this perverted kind of religion that's similar to the Jewish religion, but not exactly. They worship a little differently. Now, why would they worship a little differently? Well, they have all these other influences, don't they? They're close down here to Jerusalem. They have a big, heavy influence of the Jewish religion, but they have all these other idol, pagan people coming in, influencing them. And we see that when we read all about King Solomon, don't we? It doesn't take much. It only takes 700 wives and 300 concubines to throw you off track. And so that's what happened to him. And so they hate them so badly that they won't even set a sandal on this. And when Jesus wouldn't do that same thing, and can you imagine the talk around town when he actually sat down at a well and drank water from a woman that was a Samaritan? Whoo! They didn't like that. So now, maps are just so wonderful. The Dead Sea. That's the deadest water on the planet. That's the lowest body of water in the world. Let me get over here to here's what I want to show you. You're going down from Jerusalem in elevation. Here's Jericho. Someone says, now wait a minute, that's 825 feet below sea level. Here's the Mediterranean Sea. Here's Jerusalem, 825 feet. Now I can't see very well. The surface of the Dead Sea is 1,300 and something feet below sea level. It's another 1,300. It's that same amount to the bottom. Okay? So, if you're leaving Jerusalem and going anywhere, how are you going? Down. It doesn't matter if you're going east, west, north, south. It makes no difference. So when I leave Jerusalem, I'm going down to Jericho. It doesn't matter that Jericho is to the north. And Jericho is to the north. Now, when we look at this, that makes a big old difference now in our minds when we are thinking about going to Jericho. Or if we're in Jericho and we're going to Jerusalem. Now, that's a hefty trek, isn't it? I have to go up to Jerusalem. I sure don't want to have to go over here. That's even taller. But now that makes a big old difference. So when we look at these mountains, okay, the Lebanon Mountains, that's what I was talking about here, Lebanon Mountains. Mount Hermon, you have the Lebanon Mountains. The Lebanon Mountains run north and south on the west side of the Jordan River, up north, okay, up north. Mount Hermon is in the anti-Lebanon Mountains. That's on the eastern side of the Jordan River. So when you look at your map on page 16, the Lebanon Mountains would cross that Orontes River that's called Leontes River there to north. And so the anti-Lebanon Mountains would take up Mount Hermon there. Mount Zion, of course, is where Jerusalem is, one of 4 hills that makes up Jerusalem. Of course, now Mount Zion is kind of talks about the whole area now, not just the one spot. When we talk about Mount Nebo, what do we think of? Moses. That's where Moses died. Okay, that's where Moses died and where God buried him. What else happened there on Mount Nebo that we read about in Jude verse 9? A little scuffle went on there on Mount Nebo over Moses' body, wasn't there, between Satan and Michael, the archangel. Hey, listen, Mount Nebo is right there. I marked it on my map, east of the mouth of the Dead Sea, just east of the mouth of the Dead Sea. And so when we're looking at our maps, right there is where Michael, the archangel, fought over the body of Moses and would not allow Satan to have it. Now, he did tell Satan, I'm not going to say anything to you about it. God will handle you. But he would not let him have the body. Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. What happened there? That's where, after they went into the land of promise, where they had the cursings and the blessings read, right? Now, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim is straight west of Joppa to the north, kind of in between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. Mount Ebal is where the cursings, I believe, were read. Is that right? And the blessings were read from Mount Gerizim. Now, right here you can see this is the mountain range right here. You have the Lebanon Mountains, and then you have the anti-Lebanon Mountains. See, right here. I keep looking at that clock. I'm over. I'm all okay. We're going to have to end. I apologize. That kept throwing me off. One thing I want to show you right here, and then we'll end. That I think is very interesting. I gotta. Oh no, let me back up. Well, did I not put it on here? We have to do it. We'll have to do it next time. But it's going to be in the Jerusalem one anyway. Any comments or questions? Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. You look at the questions on chapter 1 and chapter 3, and we'll go over them together next time, and then we'll get into chapter 4.